It's not at all unusual. In fact, it's often quite lovely when new parents coo that their baby is the cutest and cleverest one ever born. But are little kids' brains big enough to make the biggest decisions, like whether they're a boy or a girl? Well, yes, according to a growing group of mums and dads who are embracing what's known as gender-creative parenting. They're deliberately keeping the sex of their children top secret because they say the kids themselves should be free to decide who they are. And that means they're being raised not as baby boys or baby girls, but as babies.
I don't even know if that was yet.
On the banks of Sydney's Georges River, two families have put on a big spread to celebrate some big news. Sarah and her partner Jordan are 15 weeks pregnant, and they're about to find out whether they're having a boy or a girl.
I just want it to be a girl because I want it to be like a mini Sarah. I'm team girl, but I hope it's a boy, so when he grows up, he'll look after his mum.
It'd be nice to have a little girl.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
It's blue for a boy, and now Mum and Dad can start making plans.
Take them to footy, go fishing with them, you know, all the boy stuff. Take them on motorbikes, that type of stuff, yeah.
And then you, Sarah? The father can do it. It's a boy thing.
Boy things, girl things, touchdowns or tutus. We're all split into two different teams from very early on. But what if no one knew the sex of the baby even after they are born? That's the philosophy behind the radical movement of gender-creative parenting, where these kids' sex is none of your business. Their parents are throwing away the gender rulebook to let the child choose in their own time whether they're a boy or a girl. Meet Bertie. Bertie likes the colour purple, fire engines and Elsa from Frozen. Finish this sentence for me. Bertie is a
child. Bertie's a child.
A gorgeous little kid.
Amy and Danny are parents to 9-year-old Evie, a girl, and 3.5-year-old Bertie. We don't know if Bertie is a he or a she, or anything else for that matter. Bertie is a they-be, because when Amy was pregnant, she and Danny made a controversial decision. So why did you decide to let a child choose their own gender?
The experience of having raised Evie and what we saw happen to Evie and the assumptions that were put on Evie as a girl were things that we weren't that comfortable with.
I said to Danny, are we going to tell people the sex of Bertie or the baby that we haven't yet had? And Danny was, quite unequivocal.
Yes, I said no. I said let's just not tell people.
Which was a bit of a shock because it was just a few days before, before I was giving birth.
How hard was it to keep it a secret?
Not as hard as we thought it would be. And there was a case of that we thought, people would find out very quickly because we'd have the relentless questioning about it. But after a while, people stop asking and then they start to make the assumptions one way or the other.
Most of us are born with clearly female or male sex organs. Gender is what we've built on top of that, the colours boys and girls wear, things they like, and the way they behave and relate to each other. Those are the rules an increasing number of parents want to break. And they say it's much easier to do that when no one knows the sex of your child. In a pink and blue world, Bertie has access to all the colours of the rainbow, the full spectrum of clothes, toys and activities. When I first saw Bertie, my first impression was, oh, that's a little girl.
We do get that a lot at the moment because Bertie is constantly in the Elsa outfit with the Elsa plait. In our family home, we make sure that we're not reinforcing gender pronouns or gender terms. We just let Bertie be who Bertie is at the moment. And yes, now they're outside into the world. We can't necessarily manage people putting that assumption onto them. But Bertie's happy enough being Bertie. And we support them to be who they are.
But what if being who they are is just so different to other kids? So is it confusing then for a toddler not to have those markers or not to be able to identify themselves in a society where so much is gender-based?
I don't think Bertie is confused at all. And I think what we're trying to do is not limit Bertie. So as Bertie gravitates towards anything, we're trying not to say, no, you can't do that, but to go, okay, sure, go and explore that thing.
It might sound extreme, but it's happening all around the world.
We're not trying to eliminate gender. We're actually trying to show how limitless gender can be, right? And just really helping kids find their own path to it and follow their lead so that they feel comfortable and authentic.
In America, someone who knows how it's done is gender creative parenting guru and social scientist Dr. Kyle Myers. 7 years ago, Kyle and her Australian husband Brent had their first baby, Zuma.
We didn't assign a gender at birth, and we didn't disclose Zuma's reproductive anatomy to people who didn't need to know. The reproductive anatomy that my kiddo was born with, I didn't want to assign too many labels and assumptions and, destinies on top of that. You can't tell what your gender is by looking at your body. Gender is something you feel on the inside.
Kyle has become the poster person for this unconventional parenting style, writing a best-selling book about her own experience. So you believe that if you're born with a penis, doesn't necessarily make you a boy?
Right. Because so a lot of people who are born with penises identify as a boy, and a lot of people who are born with vulvas identify as a girl. A big part of that is because they're assigned the boy and girl labels, right, and are socialized as such.
Isn't that confusing for a little child?
I think it's actually more confusing to make children think that the 8 billion people on the planet all neatly fit into one of two boxes.
So here, Bertie is how old?
Probably about 9 months, I reckon.
And that's been their one, a newborn picture.
In Australia, Danny and Amy have followed the same path. Scroll through their family photos and you can see that sometimes Bertie looks like a girl and sometimes Bertie looks like a boy. So short hair and then longer hair?
Yep.
Yeah.
There's a big gap between fighting gender stereotypes to not telling a small child their gender, letting them choose. Seems a little extreme.
I don't know, but I don't understand why it feels so extreme. As we interact with adults, we don't constantly go, oh, good girl, Amelia, good girl. You did a really good job on that interview. We just say, good job, Amelia. So we're just kind of saying, we're just shifting and holding back from constantly saying a reminder about gender to say that's how you need to perform.
Not big field.
No.
In this complicated new world, the children are in charge of their own gender reveal. As it turns out, one day Zuma came home from preschool and announced he was a boy.
So it was right around Zuma's 4th birthday that he said, I love he, him pronouns. And, I was like, that's fantastic.
And there's no doubt he's a self-assured, happy little boy. Spending time with these families, it's clear there's a lot of love and only good intentions in the way they're raising their children. But what happens when these babies leave their bubble and go out into the real world?
What they're doing really is unprecedented. There have been really no societies that have tried to have gender-free rearing.
Some people say what you're doing is child abuse. So when are you due, Kyle?
March 25th.
Exciting. Yeah. And are you starting from scratch? Do you need a fair bit today?
We need all of it.
Yeah. On a chilly winter's day in Portland, Oregon, Dr. Kyle Myers is on the hunt for gender-neutral baby clothes. The social scientist managed to keep the sex of her first child, Zuma, a secret for 4 years, until he was ready to choose his own gender. And she's about to do it all over again.
So would you put a baby or a toddler in something like this, regardless of gender?
For sure. Like, we had dresses for Zoomer. We will have dresses for this second kiddo. What we're really mindful of is how dresses can actually impact mobile development, though. So, like, if a child is always in dresses, then they can struggle to learn to crawl as efficiently, or climb a tree, or run. And so I think every kid should have access to dresses so that they can feel the magic of the twirl if they so choose.
In this famously liberal American city, there's plenty of support for this style of parenting. But outside their happy family bubble, there's still a huge amount of judgment, criticism, and outright hatred.
Some people say what you're doing is child abuse.
We're not, you know, but we're Zoomer has grown up in an environment where he has access to explore his interests without shame, without force, right? He can gravitate towards anything that intrigues him to wear, to play with, to dream up as, you know, like a career he might want to have someday. And we say, that's awesome, instead of saying, you can't do that because your body, because of your gender, right?
I think that's healthy, that's positive. But there's a fine line perhaps between how far this is taken and what happens. How does a child orientate themselves in a world where they are told, no, you're gender neutral, it's up to you whether you're a boy or a girl. There's a very different discussion if a child comes to their parents and at some point in their life says, well, actually, I'm questioning this and maybe I am a they, them. That's driven by the child.
Psychotherapist Mark Varmeyer runs a practice in the UK city of Brighton, home to the country's highest number of non-binary people. He works with families trying gender-neutral parenting on for size, but says for some kids, it just isn't a good fit.
Certainly from the work that I've done and the parents I've worked with and the feedback I've had, I don't think there is necessarily enough evidence yet of, across a broader spectrum of children with different temperaments, what happens, what's this like? You know, what's this like for the child? How do they feel?
Those long-term impacts.
Yeah, arguably the long-term impacts, indeed.
We do live in a world that's very gendered. Is it fair to make children feel different?
By raising a child perhaps in this way where they're not assigned a gender at all, by definition they are different. By definition they are standing out. No matter how we look at it, it does create that sense of difference, and it is ultimately still an experiment.
I think that is so funny because parenting is like the ultimate experiment, right? Like, we're all experimenting every single day. We're figuring out, how do we keep this kiddo alive? You know, what works for our family, what works for this kid.
Back in Australia, Amy and Danny are also well accustomed to defending their unusual choice. They're raising Bertie as a they. The bubbly 3.5-year-old has gone through various fads from fire trucks to Frozen and is yet to express what gender they'd like to be.
There are people who say you're just trying to push your own political views onto your children.
No, it's generally trying to step back and saying, I'm letting this little person be who they want to be.
Why do you think this style of parenting does cause so much anger and outrage?
People don't know what it's like to be parenting our child. We know that there are many stories of parents who have decided to make their children conform when they don't conform. We've heard of parents who want their child to be a footballer, so stop them going to dance, who loves playing with dolls but has to do that in secret. We're not going to start saying that's not how you should behave.
Despite the doubters, these families have some perhaps unexpected allies in the hallowed halls of science.
I think it's a fascinating experiment. I think certainly gender creative parenting in the sense of not labeling your child, not having expectations about, what they're going to be interested in, what they're going to be good at. I totally get that motivation, but it's just a very, very hard thing to do.
Renowned neuroscientist Professor Lise Elliott has been studying the human brain and gender development here at the Rosalind Franklin University of Medicine in Chicago for more than 30 years. Her work has found very little difference between male and female brains at birth and in early infancy.
There is this belief, and it really is just a belief at this time, that because there are decisive psychological differences, differences in empathy, differences in aggression and verbal skills, that at some level, we've got to be able to find these differences in the brain. There's got to be something about the function of the brain. And the way I think of it is more like it's more of a software difference than a hardware difference. It's what sorts of routines are they running? And a lot of that, frankly, is learned.
I don't have enough tools to sort through here.
Here in Dr. Elliott's lab, medical students learn how our brain wiring then changes depending on what we do with it, especially in the first 10 years of childhood.
So if our brains are actually very similar, then, society has a lot to answer for.
Well, yes and no. We are biologically different. The actual psychological differences between men and women and boys and girls are really quite small. There is so much more overlap in all of our traits and behaviors and strengths than there is difference. And yet, what putting these gender labels does on an early age is it widens the gap. It drives boys and girls apart.
Knowing this is one thing, but experimenting with it outside a lab is another thing altogether.
I think it is potentially confusing for the child. It's confusing potentially for other children.
Could their parents be setting them up for bullying and exclusion?
I think that's very possible.
It's something that Amy and Danny, who are getting ready to send almost 4-year-old Bertie off to preschool soon, are all too aware of.
You can control the variables when they're in the home as a baby, as a toddler.
Yeah.
So how do you prepare for Bertie going out into school, into the world, where a lot of the markers are gender-based?
We're not hiding the fact from Bertie that they have an anatomy and that their anatomy is similar and different to their family members.
They're well aware of their body parts.
Yeah, exactly.
Their body parts, and they know how to name their body parts. They also know how to, they are in the world, so they are constantly seeing what's going on. So it's not as if we've kind of kept them away from anything. They are exposed to everything.
And being exposed to everything means Bertie is already putting a toe in the water. For the Saturday morning swim class, Bertie is just one of the gang.
Bertie is exactly who Bertie wants to be each week, and that's allowed to be whoever they want to be.
Halfway around the world, there are no signs yet that growing up as a they-be did 7-year-old Zuma any harm. And Kyle and Brent are excited to be doing it all again.
The things that I think about have very little to do with gender. I'm thinking more of how are we gonna navigate sleeplessness?
Back into the trenches.
Yes, we're going back into the trenches.
And the trenches don't seem so bad. With the arrival of baby Neon last week. Amy and Danny have no regrets either. Yet. But even they admit, only time will tell.
Would you do it again, or is it too soon to say?
Well, we're not having any more children, but absolutely. I'd do it again. I don't...
Absolutely, for sure.
I can't see that there's been any drawbacks at all. We just hope that we're doing the best things for our kids.
And hope they grow up to be good humans.
Yes.
Exactly right.
Yes, that come with kindness and respect.
Yeah.
If they are, then we've done our job well.
Yeah.
Hello, I'm Amelia Adams. Thanks for watching 60 Minutes Australia. Subscribe to our channel now for our brand new stories and exclusive clips every week. And don't miss out on our extra minute segments and full episodes of 60 Minutes on 9now.com.au and the 9Now app.